During a military exercise in Yuma, Arizona, an M1A2 Abrams tank began losing speed, slowing down in a straight line. Fuel consumption spiked by 25%. Two military engineers, equipped with state-of-the-art tools, ran tests and analyzed data. But nothing worked. The colonel in charge of the operation demanded answers. But Rachel Morales, the brilliant lead engineer on the project, just shook her head at the numbers, unsure of what to do. That's when someone brought up a name that had almost been forgotten. Moments later, an 80-year-old man arrived at the military base, carrying a worn-out case with an infrared thermometer inside. In just 10 minutes, he would do something that all those advanced diagnostics couldn't: uncover the hidden truth buried deep inside that machine. Craig Evans walked 6 days a week to a modest auto repair shop where he worked. The building was simple. The interior walls were lined with tools hanging from makeshift hooks and faded posters of different car models. The shop belonged to his son-in-law, Adam, a hard-working, honest man who treated Craig like a father, though he knew little of the man's full story. At 80 years old, Craig carried nearly 4 decades of military service behind him, and a retirement that left him with more free time than he knew what to do with. Craig didn't earn a set salary there. Adam always tried to pay him, but Craig would wave it off. "Just give me something to work on," he'd say. And there was always something: a clogged radiator, a sputtering engine, a noisy transmission, or an AC that wouldn't cool properly. Simple problems Craig solved with the calm patience of someone who no longer had anywhere to rush off to. To the customers, he was just Adam's father-in-law, a quiet older man with white hair and grease-stained hands. Some didn't even know his name. Others gave him a polite nod. But no one imagined that those hands had once assembled and disassembled the engines of the most powerful tanks in the world. During 38 years in the Army, Craig had become a respected expert in armored vehicle maintenance. He started back in the 60s when tanks still ran on conventional engines. But it was in the 1980s that he found his true calling, developing and maintaining the Honeywell AGT 1500 turbine, the heart of the Abrams tank. Craig wasn't an engineer. He had never set foot in a university. But he had something no textbook could teach: the ability to understand what machines were trying to say. While others followed manuals, Craig developed an almost uncanny connection with engines. During the early years of the Abrams Program, Craig worked directly with lead engineers. His official title was Senior Technical Specialist, but in practice, he was the one engineers turned to when they couldn't explain a malfunction. He remembered those long weeks testing prototypes under brutal heat. There he was, adjusting valves and calibrating systems. The young engineers complained about the temperature. Craig just kept working. Every Abrams tank that fired, maneuvered, and withstood enemy fire carried a trace of his work. It was, without a doubt, the most fulfilling time of his career. But years passed. New engineers came along with new computers and new methods. Craig remained relevant until a military reorganization shifted priorities, putting academic certifications above hands-on experience. He was reassigned to an administrative role, a quiet kind of forced retirement. Craig left the Army without ceremony, no party, no speeches. Just home, where his wife Karen waited patiently, as she always had during his long absences. Karen passed away 5 years ago from diabetes complications. Craig was left alone in a house that suddenly felt far too big. His children lived far away. They visited on Christmas and his birthday, but their lives were too full to make room for a retired father with too much time on his hands. It was Adam, married to Susan, Craig's oldest daughter, who suggested he move to Phoenix. "There's a shop here, Mr. Craig. There's always something to work on." Craig sold the house, packed up 4 decades of memories into a few boxes, and moved into a small apartment just 3 blocks from the shop. For the past 5 years, Craig found comfort in a simple routine. He woke up early, had breakfast with Adam, worked on engines during the day, and watched the news at night. No one knew about his military past, because he never brought it up. When asked, he simply said, "I worked with machines in the Army." That Tuesday, Craig was helping Adam with the transmission of a 2015 Chevrolet Silverado when the shop phone rang. Adam picked it up, spoke for a few minutes, then hung up looking puzzled. Mr. Craig, it was someone from the military base. They asked if I knew a Craig Evans, a former Army sergeant. Craig paused, his hand frozen mid-turn on the bolt he'd been tightening. What did you say? I said yes, that you were here. The guy wants to speak with you, said it's urgent. Craig wiped his hands on a dirty rag, looked at the half-dismantled Silverado, and gave a quiet nod. Tell him I'm here. He can talk to me. The call came 20 minutes later. Craig Evans? Yes, this is Craig. Mr. Evans, this is Earl Coleman, chief mechanic at Yuma Base. Do you remember me? We worked together on Abrams maintenance back in '94. Craig smiled for the first time that day. Earl Coleman, he'd been a young soldier back then, always asking questions, eager to learn. Of course I remember, Earl. How are you? I'm good, sir. But we've got a serious problem here. An M1A2 with a fault nobody can figure out. The colonel's breathing down our necks and... Well, I thought of you. Craig leaned back in the broken chair behind the counter. What kind of problem? Fuel consumption is up 25%, and it's losing speed on flat terrain. 2 engineers have already been through it. They tested everything. Filters, pumps, sensors. Nothing's worked. Craig knew those symptoms. He'd seen them before. Mr. Evans, can you come out here? Colonel McGowan wants a solution by the end of the day. If we don't figure it out, Thursday's exercise is getting scrapped. Craig looked over at Adam, who pretended not to be listening. When do you need me? Right now, sir. I can send a vehicle to pick you up. An hour later, Craig was in the back seat of a military Humvee, riding through desert roads on the way to Yuma Proving Ground. The soldier driving was young and polite, but clearly curious about the 80-year-old man with the battered case in his lap. The base hadn't changed much. Still an endless stretch of sand and military vehicles scattered like giant toys. Craig felt a familiar kind of nostalgia, not quite longing, but the recognition of a place that had once meant something. Earl was waiting for him at the main maintenance bay. Older now, with gray hair, but still wearing the same respectful smile. Mr. Evans, it's really good to see you again. You too, Earl. Where's the tank? Earl led him to the M1A2 Abrams parked at the center of the hangar. The tank looked flawless. Tons of military-grade tech. Its main turret pointed toward the far wall. Craig knew every bolt in that machine. Colonel Heather McGowan walked into the bay with an impatient expression. Which one of you is Craig Evans? Craig stepped forward. That's me, Colonel. That tank needs to be operational by tomorrow morning. We've already lost too much time. Near the tank, 2 officers were studying reports on laptops. Earl introduced them. Mr. Evans, this is Lieutenant Mark Dillard and Engineer Rachel Morales. Dillard, a man in his mid-30s, greeted Craig politely but without much interest. Morales, a 34-year-old woman with her hair in a ponytail, barely looked up from her computer. She was known for being brilliant, top of her class. Mr. Evans, Dillard said, we appreciate you coming, but we've already done a full analysis. We checked the air filters, hydraulic pump, injection system, oil pressure. Everything's within normal parameters. Craig nodded, set his case on the ground, and began opening it. I understand. Mind if I take a look at the engine? Morales finally looked up, noticing the simple case and the basic tools Craig was taking out. Mr. Evans, with all due respect, this is an extremely complex system. It's nothing like the old engines. We're dealing with cutting-edge technology here. Craig pulled out an infrared thermometer, a simple tool. Morales glanced at it, then at Dillard, who tried to hide a smirk. You plan to use that? Dillard asked. Not plan. I will. Craig powered up the infrared thermometer and began measuring temperatures at specific points on the engine. Morales whispered something to Dillard, who shook his head. Earl remained silent, watching Craig work with the same precise method he remembered from decades ago. Craig measured the right side heat exchanger, 550 degrees, normal. Then the left, 640 degrees. He paused, looked at the thermometer, measured again. Same result. Earl, can we run the engine for 5 minutes? Of course, Mr. Evans. The Abrams roared to life. The sound of the AGT 1500 turbine echoed through the bay, a sound Craig knew like a familiar song. After 5 minutes, he asked them to shut it down and repeated the measurements. Right heat exchanger 565 degrees. Left 670 degrees. McGowan looked puzzled, trying to get a better view of what Craig was doing, but said nothing. She just wanted the issue resolved. Morales, however, was visibly irritated, her skepticism obvious. "I didn't study all these years to watch this nonsense," she muttered. Craig turned off the thermometer and addressed the engineers. "The issue is in the left side recuperator. There's a partial blockage in the ceramic core. The temperature difference between the exchangers is throwing off the gas flow, forcing the turbine to work harder to compensate." Morales stared at Craig with a mix of disbelief and growing frustration. "Mr. Evans, I studied engineering for years. I have a master's and a PhD. There's no way a basic thermometer could detect something our diagnostic equipment didn't catch." Craig put the thermometer back in the case. "You're right, Doctor. Your tools are far better than mine." He closed the case and started walking toward the exit of the bay. "Where are you going?" Earl asked. "You don't need me. You've got it all figured out." Morales watched Craig walking away, then turned to Dillard, who nervously flipped through his reports. At the door, Craig stopped. Without turning around, he said, "Earl, if you ever decide to test the engine's recuperator, give me a call." And with that, he walked out, leaving behind an awkward silence and decades of knowledge no degree could teach. Craig was drinking coffee in his apartment kitchen when the phone rang. It was 7 p.m., 3 hours after he'd left the base. "Mr. Evans?" The voice was Earl's, but the tone had completely changed. "You need to come back. You were right. Completely right. Colonel McGowan wants to speak with you personally." Early the next morning, Craig was back at the military base. The scene was different now. Dillard and Morales were hunched over a technical manual, their expressions tense. Earl greeted him with a sheepish smile. "Mr. Evans, we tested the recuperator like you suggested. The temperature difference was exactly as you said. We found a partial blockage in the ceramic core on the left side." Colonel McGowan, the unit's commanding officer, stepped forward. "Mr. Evans, I owe you an apology for the way you were received yesterday." Craig shook her outstretched hand. "No need, Colonel." "There is, sir. Dr. Morales explained what happened. She also told me you identified in minutes what our entire team couldn't detect." Morales approached, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Evans, I owe you an apology as well. I was disrespectful. You were right and I was wrong. We all make mistakes. It's part of learning." Colonel McGowan continued. "Mr. Evans, I read your file after Earl mentioned your name. Retired Master Sergeant, 38 years of service. AGT 1500 turbine specialist. You literally helped build these engines. Why is one of the architects of the Abrams Program fixing cars in Phoenix instead of being here with us?" It was the question Craig had always expected, but never had a simple answer for. "Colonel, I'm 80 years old. After I retired, the world changed. I'm happy doing what I do now." Dillard stepped up, carrying a toolbox. "Mr. Evans, the Colonel authorized me to ask, would you be willing to repair the recuperator? We've got the parts, but frankly, we'd like to see your expertise in action with a real turbine core replacement." Craig looked at the tank, then at the team gathered around him. Young officers, educated engineers, trained technicians, all waiting for an 80-year-old man to fix the problem. The Colonel motioned for everyone to step back. "The bay is yours, Sergeant." Craig pulled out tools he hadn't touched in years, but his hands still remembered them like old friends. He started dismantling the access panel to the left recuperator, removing covers and disconnecting lines with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Earl stayed close, handing him tools as needed. The others watched from a distance, like students observing a masterclass. The ceramic core was visibly damaged. Combustion residue had built up, creating a layer of deposits that partially blocked airflow. Craig removed the faulty module, carefully cleaned the honeycomb structure, replaced the oil filters, and reinstalled everything with new thermal seals. He worked in silence, his movements deliberate and exact. Despite his age, his hands remained steady. Every connection, every adjustment, Every bolt tightened with the muscle memory of 4 decades. 2 hours later, Craig closed the last panel and stepped back from the tank. "Go ahead. Fire it up." The AGT 1500 turbine roared back to life. Craig picked up his thermometer and took the readings again. "It's perfect," Earl murmured. Colonel McGowan stepped closer. "Mr. Evans, how can I possibly thank you?" "You don't need to, Colonel. It was a pleasure working on these engines again. Reminded me of the old days." "Sergeant, may I make a proposal? We could really use someone like you here. Senior technical consultant. Pay to match your experience." "Colonel, I appreciate the offer, but my time in that world is behind me. I have a simple life now." "I understand," McGowan said, "but you just saved a multi-million-dollar military exercise. That deserves recognition." She pulled an envelope from her pocket. "This is at least a token for today's service." Craig hesitated before accepting the envelope. "Colonel, I didn't do this for money." "I know, Sergeant. That's exactly why you deserve it." Craig tucked the envelope into his shirt pocket without opening it. He took one last look at the M1A2 Abrams. The engine was running flawlessly. Over 60 tons of power, ready to complete its mission, thanks to a man who had dedicated his life to understanding the heart of those machines. The next morning, Craig was helping Adam with the engine of a Ford F-150 when he heard footsteps at the entrance of the shop. He looked up and saw Rachel Morales standing in the doorway. "Mr. Evans, may I speak with you?" Adam looked over, curious, but Craig motioned for him to keep working. "Of course, Doctor. Come on in." Rachel walked over, visibly uneasy. "Mr. Evans, I needed to come here in person. Yesterday, I was arrogant and disrespectful." "We already talked about that. It's all right." "No, it's not. I spent years studying, graduated at the top of my class, specialized at one of the best universities in the country. And when it came to a real, practical moment, I completely failed. I still have so much to learn." Craig leaned against the fender of the F-150. "That's a valuable lesson. And it means you're on the right track." Rachel looked around the shop, at the simple tools, the old cars, the modest surroundings. "It can't be easy, going from such an important job to this." Craig followed her gaze. "Doctor, importance doesn't come from where we work. It comes from being useful wherever we are. Here I fix cars for people who need them to get to work, to pick up their kids from school. Yesterday, I fixed a tank that helps protect a nation and its people. Both are important in their own way." Rachel stayed silent for a moment, reflecting. She was still young enough to let life teach her, because real experience doesn't age. She nodded slowly, taking in his words that would no doubt reshape how she carried herself. The arrogance in her eyes was gone, replaced by respect and a quiet humility. She extended her hand and shook Craig's firmly. "I hope to see you at the base again one day, Mr. Evans." Craig gave her a small smile. "If you ever need me, you know where to find me." Rachel walked back to her car, the morning sun reflecting off her face as she drove away from the shop. Craig turned calmly back to the F-150's engine, resuming his work beside Adam. There were no ceremonies, no honors, no speeches. Just tools in the right hands and the quiet dignity of someone who never needed to prove anything to anyone. After all, a true legacy isn't found in the words we say, but in the silent, humble way we keep being useful exactly where we are, no matter where that may be. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next.